Well, good morning and good afternoon, members of the collaborative and guests. My name's Tom Skura. I'm the Vice President of Content and Programs with the CISO Coalition. And on behalf of all my colleagues and members, we welcome you here today to talk about a very persistent and growing threat, ransomware. And what we want to do today is to share the approach that the collaborative has taken to help its members and prospective members address this persistent threat. I'd like to introduce as our key panelist and also a key member on the executive committee, Arlen McMillan is the CISO of CSO of Kirkland and Ellis LLP. I've included his bio on the deck. I'm not going to read it. I'm going to let Arlen talk a little bit about it. But again, this deck is available to members and to our guests by request. And when we get to the end of the discussion, we'll certainly give you the means of being able to reach out for that. So Arlen, welcome. Again, I thank you for all your help in putting this information together and certainly your leadership to the collaborative.
Great. Thank you, Tom. Very quickly, I am a member of the collaborative, part of the executive group or committee rather, and that by itself, I think, is an indicator of what I think of the collaborative. We'll talk a little bit more in a slide or two about what the collaborative does, some of the benefits, some of the key benefits. Just very quickly about me and my bio, as Tom mentioned, I'm Chief Security Officer of Kirkland & Ellis, global law firm. You can see what we do there. I've had prior roles as CISO for United Airlines, City of Chicago, and my first half of my career in financial services, protecting banks and the such. I think the key thing for me, at least, I started in technology. I live in security now, and wow, how have things changed over the past 20 years, 10 years, 5 years? The pace of change, the velocity of the threat landscape is impressive, is one way to call it. It's an exciting career to live in if you don't like sleep and liking to work on fire drills. So Tom, back to you.
Thanks very much, Arlen. I think you've hit the nail on the head, and I think the recent Log4j vulnerability just reminds us that we don't sleep at night and we're always being vigilant. I almost feel like talking about ransomware is now old news, but it is not at all. So to your point about the cybersecurity collaborative and who we are and the value we create, it's for the cybersecurity leaders, the CISOs, and the members of their team. And the way we do it, we are a collaborative organization. We are vendor independent. We don't support any particular vendor products. We do talk about tools amongst ourselves. I think the benefit is sharing, does this tool work? How does it work? And that sort of thing. But we do not have vendors actively preach to us, nor do we share member information with vendors. So two ways in which we do this. Well, let me just point out the daily morning security report. When you join, you'll never be blindsided when your CEO comes in. I just heard about this Log4j vulnerability. What's going on about it, and you haven't heard about it. Every morning early, I think it's 6:30 Eastern time, you'll receive the latest news, breaches, vulnerabilities, and it comes to your email, and you'll always be prepared. The other thing we do is we have a library of CISO developed tools and resources. We have vastly increased that library, and we're continuing to do that. That library is based on what members contribute, the tools, the presentations that they use to their boards, plus it is the results of task force that we put together, working groups on topics like cloud, third-party security, obviously ransomware. We have meetings that run 10 to 12 weeks. There are specific topics at every meeting where members share and discuss things. We put together the information from those members into guidance documents and tools that we develop and also that we get from members. So the idea behind this is to help our members navigate through the challenges of any specific security topic. But it's much more than that. We have Slack channels for collaboration. And for major vulnerabilities, like I brought up Log4j, which is on everyone's minds, and certainly their members are addressing this actively. We just had a major call at noon today Eastern, where members shared how they learned about this, what practices they're following, what are the best sources of getting information, to know how to address the threat. And we're going to have continuing calls on this. So for members of the collaborative, we urge you to join these calls. For new members, as you're trying to navigate the issues with this vulnerability, this is a chance to collaborate with your peers and hear what's working and not. And there are some, we learned today, there are some good sources of information to learn what to do and others that are not up to date. And that's the type of thing that you get from collaboration. Again, Arlen, to your point, the collaboration occurs in many ways, and these are just some of the things that we offer members.
I think we can shorten it by just simply saying the bad guys work together, and if the good guys aren't working together, we won't have a chance to succeed, right? Especially in things like Log4j, ransomware. There's a lot of really smart people thinking hard about these topics. So you're not alone. Tap into that. It's a huge value. Work with your community.
I think that's a good point. The bad guys are collaborating all together. We have to do the same, and we have to act decisively on it. So let me just run by the topics that we're going to go over today. We'll give you a little background. We call it raising ransomware, and it's not raising it, making it better. It's the opposite term. It sounds the same. How do we attempt to destroy it, protect ourselves, and respond to it? I'll give you a little background on the threat anatomy, growth tactics, the impact, and the response. I think it's important to set it in context. I think we all know this is a pervasive threat, but maybe we need to refocus on how pervasive it is and what tactics have changed that ransomware agents are using. So we'll go through that briefly. And then we're going to talk about how we at the collaborative are working together to help members and prospective members address this threat. We take the best practices that we put together at our meetings and put it into a practices guide. The practices guide is, and I'll go over it, is organized in a step-by-step approach to how you can address the ransomware threat. We also support this with tools, because as you go through this, you're going to have to figure out, how am I going to organize, for really effectively stopping this threat. So we've developed a ransomware preparedness assessment. It's a simple assessment that you can use, and we'll demonstrate that to you, that shows where you are, provides some strategic guidance in terms of where you need to be. The other thing we provided, and these are member provided tools, is a pay or not to pay decision criteria matrix. One of the things that you need to do is to start having those discussions on pay or not to pay early before you've been attacked. You don't want to be having those discussions while the agent's waiting to pay and then threatening to expose your data. I don't know if you agree with that, but we talked very much about having criteria and then running through different scenarios, like I can't recover, I can partially recover. Their ethical considerations. It's extremely important that in your incident response plan that be discussed with the right folks. We provide also an incident response reference architecture. This is member provided, that basically takes process and technologies and pieces them together. And it's so important to have that architecture. It was very useful in actually stopping a ransomware attack for some of our members. So that's provided as well. And Boardroom education and presentations on how you educate the board on the threat and their responsibilities and the responses that you're following up on. We'll summarize some of the key things, talk about new task force initiatives, and follow up with the Q&A. I know we're getting some chat and Q&As. We will address that toward the end of the session.
Oh, actually, Tom, my apologies. Can you go back one slide really quick?
Certainly can.
Thank you. So first of all, and I hope this is okay with you, Tom. We're already getting some questions, and keep them coming.
Oh,
I'm doing it. My job is to interrupt Tom.
Yeah.
And
well, I think that's a good job. But if you want to, if there are any questions that you're getting that we feel, you want to.
Yeah, I'll bring them in. I'll bring them in. We've already gotten a couple. We'll address those a little bit later. Thank you to those individuals who've already sent them in. Keep them coming. We're tracking, and I'll weave responses in as we go through the deck. Before we go to the next slide, I'd like to reframe this or frame this slightly different.
Sure.
In people's minds. The preparedness assessment and the incident response architecture, they're pretty closely aligned. And the pay or no pay and the boardroom education are exceptionally closely aligned. Okay, so when you start getting into this pay no pay, that's not a technology decision. That's not a security decision, right? That is a leadership, that's an executive leadership discussion and decision. For them to feel equipped to be able to answer that pay no pay, they have to understand what this world of ransomware means. What is the risk to the organization? What are the potential recovery strategies? How long is it going to take? How much is it going to cost me to recover, right? So when you start this whole conversation of pay no pay, it comes in the context of this boardroom and executive conversation that happens. And we're gonna pull that apart and touch on some key topics, but I just want to frame it that way in people's minds as we're getting into the deck.
I think that's an excellent way to perceive this. And you really have to decide who's going to make the recommendation on that, and who's going to actually be accountable for that, right? I mean, those kinds of things have to be decided. And it's better to have that thought out up front. And as you said, have the players that are going to make that decision be involved in that process. Extremely important. Thank you, Arlen, for that.
Absolutely.
So I think we talked a little bit about the background on the task force. We organize this, as I said, in the 10 or 12 sessions. Each session talks about specific topics. So we're not just running in and repeating what we did. We build cumulative meeting notes. We don't attribute the discussion items to members, but it's a way of documenting what was said to develop our best practices. They share the successes, false starts, and challenges. Members are very open about we didn't succeed here. We started with this tool. We moved to another tool. We don't record the sessions. It's just sharing as we go along. And there's great value from the collaboration, I'd say, as much as from the deliverables. Wouldn't you say, Arlen? Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And one of the key things, listen, we're talking about a product that has been built and is being provided to the community. And I probably should have mentioned this earlier, but this is there is the conversation, it is the collaboration, and then there is the product. And if you look at most organizations, it's just conversation. I don't mean to downplay that, but having a force multiplier, a way that you can more quickly make impacts within your own organization by using tools or reference guides that are built from the collaborative, by the peers in the collaborative, that's a huge value add. And that's different. Most organizations, most groups that come together just don't have that product. They don't do that. It's all they lean on the discussion side. And again, that's not bad or wrong. It's just incomplete, in my opinion. And that's one of the reasons why I think this work that's being done by a collaborative is so impactful.
Thank you for that. And that's what we attempt to do and make happen is put something together that's consumable for those that didn't have the benefit of attending this particular task force, new members coming in. So I'm going to go through sort of the velocity statistics relatively quickly. And as I mentioned before, the slide deck is available to members and available to prospective members on request. So how prevalent is the threat? Here's an example. It's highly prevalent and without question growing, as you can see in the statistics. 69% of all malware attacks are actually ransomware attacks. So malware is turning into the, you got to pay, okay? It's an increase of 30% over the same period last year. And what we've seen in the morning's, the security report is a number of sectors being targeted: government, industrial. Obviously, 80% of the malware goes to industrial sector, medical, education, and scientific organizations. But honestly, you can't look at this and say, I'm not in a sector that's not being targeted, because all sectors are really being targeted. But this is a point in time. What tactics have they employed? Email phishing, we're all aware of that. Remote desktop protocol compromise, unpatched software vulnerabilities have been traditional vectors over the last several years. But they're expanding to exploiting a wider variety of vulnerabilities, including those on older unpatched systems. And I'm not going to read through all this, but we've looked at the morning security report from September to November. Notice old cold fusion vulnerabilities, Microsoft Server Exchange, targeting backup systems, Veeam, for example, SQL injection flaws. These are flaws that we've been dealing with for years and years. Well, ransomware agents are still going to take advantage of these, whether we fix them or not. And so just saying that I've got my email phishing campaign all set and that's going to solve or prevent this from happening, one can't really do that, because even in this short period of time, there have been more vulnerabilities that have been exploited. So what are the tactics? Well, on the call, we talked about extortion, double extortion, triple extortion. They're finding more ways to do this. So pay for the decryption key was sort of the mantra when we first started out. Then it's, I have your data, pay or I release your data. And then thirdly, pay or I will attack your customers, your employees, with information that I have. So not only are they, it was just for the decryption key, but now I've got your data and I'm actually going to use that data against you, your employees and customers. So it's pretty serious. And I think what we see in the articles is that they're threatening to extort you if you contact law enforcement, if you use a negotiation firm, which many members have done on this team. They've gone through their insurance companies and they've gotten the names of negotiating agents to set up the Bitcoin accounts and potentially be involved in any negotiations. But they are threatening. Again, if I have to negotiate with one of these firms, I'm going to release your data, and it's pretty stark. So, what organizations have breached? We talked about this. Breaches are publicly disclosed, occur almost daily, not focused on any one industry. So these are the companies that were reported in the morning security report, again from August to October. Let's just say any company can be subjected to it. This isn't to call out or embarrass these organizations, but it just goes to show you that they range from cooperatives to healthcare organizations, to media organizations. Anyone can be a target and make the news. So what have the impacts been of ransomware? The damage costs are increasing tenfold. The average payout doubled between Q1 2020 and 2021 from 20,000 to 54,000. Highest known payout was around 10 million. And again, sectors experience above average costs for education, distribution and transport, disruptive to our economy, financial services, business and professional services, retail, and IT telecommunications.
So actually, can you pause 1 second, go back?
I certainly can.
This is a perfect place to pause and address some of the questions that have come in. Because a lot of them have to do, at least what's coming in right now, many of them have to do around board communications, pay, no pay decisions. You know, we have Todd Fitzgerald in here talking about triple extortion, new vector. Listen, you know, I see triple extortion and I see double secret probation. Listen, these guys are going to do whatever they can to make money. It'll be quadruple extortion. They'll do whatever they can and act in any unscrupulous manner to do what, or to get what they want, and that's your money. Right? So in a way, consider that these things are all bad and they're going to have all these different strategies, and you're not in control of that. So let them do what they're going to do. The only thing you're in control of, or you have a chance of being in control of, is how you set up your defenses and your preparedness of your organization. That's what you have your control. You have the most control over. So focus on that. So very quickly, pay no pay discussion around OFAC. Talked about negotiators a moment ago, that they threaten that if you work with a negotiator, then they're going to release your data. Here's the thing. I strongly of the opinion that everybody should be working with a negotiator. They also, we talk about this just a little bit, but I'm going to underline it now. And pardon me, Tom, I'm jumping the deck here a little bit.
No, absolutely, please. Given
the questions coming in. Working with a negotiator does two things. It puts professionals in the driver's seat interacting with the fraud, the fraudster, the ransomware actor. They know how to work with these individuals. They can assess their likeliness to play ball with you. They know their history, that threat actor's history. They know what the average and range payments typically are for this type of threat actor. So oftentimes, if you do end up choosing to pay, they can negotiate a much lower price. Number one. Number two. Number three, they can pay on, depending on who you work with, they act essentially as your broker. They pay the threat actor. Now, why is that super important? Listen, I don't want to have to keep 22 different coin in a wallet that I manage for the potentiality that my organization gets ransomed. Right? You never know what coin they're going to be asking for. So beyond that, and the fact of the risks of just trying to manage millions of dollars in coin is not something I think anybody really wants to do. Pay a small fee, work with one of these groups. They'll negotiate on your behalf. They'll also pay on your behalf, so you don't have to manage that coin. And then finally, on that regard, they do the due diligence to ensure that OFAC is satisfied. You're not paying, you pay for a third party. You're essentially transferring that risk of OFAC sanction onto that third party. Now, you know, listen, I'm not an attorney. I want to be very clear. I work in a law firm. I'm not an attorney. I am not providing legal advice. All of those disclaimers I think you expect to hear from me. While you can never fully transfer your own accountability, you can, by bringing in a third party. By bringing in the third party, you're demonstrating due diligence and due care. You're bringing in a professional. So in the event that your third party, your ransomware negotiator, pays that actor and they end up being on the OFAC list, you've greatly reduced the potentiality of sanction by OFAC. Greatly reduced the possibility. Now, OFAC and Treasury has not come out and said those words. I want to be clear about that, but that is how, if you look at the history of, if you look at history of Treasury and OFAC, and other sort of regulatory regimes in this way. That holds true, so it's reasonable to expect it to hold true here. So using a third party, the takeaway here, super important, many benefits, strongly encourage you to run, don't walk, and investigate that as an option for your organization. One of the comments came in that government organizations or entities or municipalities, state agencies have a very different playing field. Listen, I was in the city of Chicago. I built the security program for the city of Chicago under Mayor Emanuel. I get it. Thank you for all of you who are working on behalf of municipal, state, and federal government. It is not easy. I wish it was easier. We've not done a good job in making your job better and more effective. And that's just reality. I don't have any great comments on there. I don't have any great advice. You just got to work with your Department of Legal and work through your elected officials, because in the end, they run the show. Finally, way back when a question came in, why aren't the good guys doing more to talk together? I think it's getting better. I've seen it get better over the years. But I think there's a fundamental problem. Good guys versus bad guys. I know when I was at other organizations, and again, I think this is really changing, but this is still with us, that there's two things. One, security is looked at as a competitive advantage. Don't tell that other guy how you solve that problem. Why? Because you just made it cheaper on them. That's my business competitor. Make them spend all the money on R&D to try to figure out how to deliver X, Y, Z product or solutioning ABC business case, right? So I have seen this kind of competitive advantage concept getting in the way of good guys talking. The other is embarrassment. People don't want to open their kimono. People don't want to air their dirty laundry. They're embarrassed. Again, this is not so much with the security professionals. This is more on the business side. And I'm really seeing these things eroding away and embracing much more collaboration and discussion amongst the good guys. So thank you, Tom. Just wanted to get those pieces in.
Very important pieces, and thank you for those questions and for addressing the questions. Yeah, I've talked to someone who's negotiated, and they can significantly reduce the price for all the reasons that you mentioned. It's good to set that up. Do you recommend having that relationship set up beforehand?
With the negotiators?
Yes, yeah.
Oh, 100%. Okay. You should have that. The worst time to set up a contract is in the midst of an incident.
There you go.
Right? Set up that contract way in advance. There's a nominal retainer fee that you'll give them. And like a lot of your incident response groups, you can often, if you don't use that money for a ransomware response, you can parlay that into something else, like a tabletop or a training exercise.
That's a good point, right?
Right, so it's not lost. Strongly, again, don't walk, run, find out who these people are. I've got my favorites, but I'm obligated not to share who those are because we're not vendor specific. I should know it. I'm very vendor specific, but that's me, Arlen McMillan, as opposed to within the collaborative. So I'll keep that to myself. Right,
and if you have cyber insurance, they will recommend some attention.
Yeah, that's a great place to start. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Arlen. I appreciate that. So I think this is the point. What's the problem? Organizations are not fully prepared to address this. They admit that in studies that have been found. 89% say, I'm not ready to address this, and they're overwhelmed by the magnitude of the threat and inundated by vendor-based guidance. some of which is good, but some of which really supports the vendor. So our approach has been, let's offer practical guidance derived from member experience, step-by-step focused approach. So the guidance basically isn't just listing a series of things, but how do you organize that guidance and then move forward to improve your posture against ransomware? And where do we get the greatest bang for the buck? So I'm going to go through that. And then, as we mentioned, supplement that with tools. So let me just go through some of this quickly. We have an Addressing the Ransomware Best Practices Guidance document. There are 4 preparation steps that we talk about. There's an assessment tool and guidance on assessing where you are, and then from that, developing some strategy and plans to improve it. And then there's supplemental guidance, much of which Arlen talked about today. How do you communicate to the board? Business continuity DRP, how does that work in the context of ransomware? Incident management, how do we change our incident management practices? And then pay or no pay decisions. And then we have a ransomware controls table that was created by members that provides guidance on how you implement these controls. So prepare for success, and many of you have already done this, but it's important to be reminded that you've got to communicate your concerns and intentions with executives. The importance, the threat issues, the importance of addressing this, get them on board to support you in terms of your decision-making and your finances. Number 2, understand the scope, your environment. You may be in charge of security and IT, but you may have an OT section that runs your manufacturing firms. They're part of that. Ransomware isn't going to just attack you and not them. So, you may need to bring in your colleagues into the discussion and into the decision-making processes. Identify your key stakeholders, and there are a number of them. And it's not just the technical folks and IT folks and security folks, but it's going to be the executives that are going to have to make the pay or no pay decisions on this. And many of the members have established actually a task force within their organizations that consist of these key stakeholders to really put focus on this particular problem. So I know, Arlen, I think the executive involvement in communications upfront is important. Any other comments?
Yeah, no, it's huge. Really, it's just absolutely huge. And if you're going to use this as a topic, as a way to get in, to create a dialogue with your executive leadership, great, then use it. But you need to be doing it all the time. You need to have a tight relationship. I find a tight relationship with your general counsel. A COO can work really well as well. The key is make sure it's not just through a CIO. Your security leadership has to be tied into executive leadership. It's got to be a separate relationship. So got to build that now, right? If you're going to use ransomware and this topic, which all boards are thinking about, okay, great, then use that as your way in. Be very thoughtful about that. And what is it that you're saying? Make sure your tone and tenor. What is your messaging? These are executive leaders that don't typically know technology. Make sure that your conversation is within a context of a risk management framework. What are the risks? What are the impacts? What are the remediations? It's that type of conversation. You have to come as demonstrate that you're a business leader, because there's risks and rewards. If you come talking bits and bytes or technology, you're not going to make it. This is about a risk management conversation.
Exactly. And I think some of the guidance that we're going to talk about will help you to communicate to the executives. And I think that's a good point. Assess your preparedness against key ransomware controls. So I have to thank, again, I'm praising Arlen here, but I have to thank you for your idea for taking the controls that we talked about that are apropos to ransomware, organizing them according to the NIST cybersecurity framework. And what we did in our discussion is decided which controls have higher value than others because you got to prioritize always in security based upon risks. How difficult are they to implement relatively in terms of, it's massive. I've got to do it on all my infrastructure. And what are the relative costs? So, and we'll get into our ransomware preparedness assessment, which really produces this chart. But talking about ransomware and its impact, and then showing where you are, gives you a basis of moving forward. The third thing you can do is, once you know where you are, I don't want to get into this as a relatively complex chart, but you can take a look at the potential controls and evaluate effectiveness, implementation difficulty, and cost. And here's an example of a matrix that you can use. What are the critical controls? How difficult are they? And the relative costs are based upon the size. So I could do a lot through EDR containment, for example, detection and containment. I'm not saying that's the only thing you need to do, but that came out as a key control. In fact, many members said it actually stopped and alerted us to ransomware, or removing local rights administrations. Still, business continuity, IT asset management, restoring to a clean environment are absolutely essential and key. They're going to cost a little bit more, but you're still going to have to do it. So kind of take a look and prioritize. And then you can leverage the matrix that we put together for each of these controls. And there are member comments and best practices on each of these. So after you've chosen which ones you want to focus on, prioritize them, look at the member best practices in terms of how to make them effective and make them work. Step 4. Quick strategy, and this is, if I had nothing and I have to quickly decide what to do, be able to recover operationally. And the controls we talk about are protected backups, clean environment recovery, business continuity, and DR. Failover is not an effective strategy. If you're just failing over, if one environment downs the other, both can be impacted. You have to have backups, incremental and full backups, restored or clean environment, and you have to restore systems configuration. This is challenging, right, Arlen? I mean, but honestly, you can't.
You got to do it.
In situation.
You got to do it, guys. Listen, bad will happen. We're talking about one type of bad, and that's called ransomware, which attacks your data, which is a fundamental business requirement. You have to have your data to run your business. If you don't have your data, there are few businesses that are going to be able to continue to function, maybe function period, or function well without significant impact. So if you're going to do anything, number one, make sure your backup strategy is highly effective. Again, there's a lot more detail under the hood here, but we're talking about at least 2 copies, preferably 3. One of those copies is a write once media, immutable copy, right? Because when you have a ransomware wildfire burning across your environment, you don't want to discover that there was some sort of unexpected bridge into that backup enclave that you thought was well protected behind walls. It always happens. People are always getting surprised that there was a bridge. So solution it just by having immutable copies. Can't write to them. If you can't write to them, you can't encrypt them.
That's good. What was that, worm technology? I think
worm. That's the old word. I'm an old guy. I use worm. It's write once, read many. Right. Modern term is immutable copy. Yeah.
Right. Be able to detect and respond quickly and decisively. So here's where your EDR detection response capabilities are important. When we say isolation capabilities, and this is important within incident management, you've got to make sure your security teams have the capability and the authority to shut down network segments, isolate systems to stop the spread of ransomware. You can't decide that in the middle of an attack. That all has to be known up front, right? Your executives have to give you permission to make mistakes. I know I've run teams back with Verizon. We made a lot of mistakes when we shut down stuff, but never did we ever get accused of, faulted for that because we stopped the spread of something. And look at failed login attempts. Make sure you're, that there isn't privilege escalation. That's a attack vector. And make sure to establish and test the pay, no pay decision criteria as part of the ability to respond quickly, because once the ransom has occurred, ransom attack has occurred, you've got to respond quickly.
So this shutting down networks, I've had this specific conversation with my chairman and what is equivalent to our board here.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of tough questions. Be prepared. If you're telling them that you're asking for the authority to shut down their ability to do business, and you're not going to be asking for approval, that's going to be a tough conversation. Come prepared. But I'll tell you, at least in my conversation, they were very appreciative of the discussion. They got the risks and they granted the authority.
Great. And lastly, focus on the most effective protection measures. So a couple things. Local admin rights, controls over that is important. It's something that can be done. It's more a procedural issue and an issue in certain organizations not wanting to have control over installing software, but that's important. Along with phishing training is a high value, relatively low cost thing to do. Sensitive data encryption, again, there's this level, but then there's column or file levels is even more important to make sure that the encrypted data is not visible. And then obviously enforce strong privilege access controls so there's not privilege escalation. So this is quickly just summarizing everything. It's, again, there's a lot to this, but if you had to focus on a few things, these are the things to focus on. So we have a ransomware preparedness assessment. We don't have time to actually demo it because I want to make sure that we answer the questions and get some more guidance through Arlen. But we have a workbook with an assessment questionnaire of drop-down and checkbox questions. And what we produce is an overall preparedness score. And we do generate the control heat map for you in answering that. The other thing that I didn't show on this slide is we do provide a one-page summary of the heat map and some recommended strategies based upon your responses. It is an Excel form right now. It's very easy to do. You can use it, and then you can use these charts to, again, based upon all this being input from the Cybersecurity Collaborative, to show your executives this is where we're at, and then you can develop strategies around here. And then this is you can do multiple assessment points, so you can see where you are in a point of time and show improvement. A couple other tools. I'm just going to go through this quickly. Here's an example of an incident response reference architecture that was provided by a member. This is a type of information we do get from our members. It's very detailed, but it actually links many technologies to various parts in the incident response framework here. It's built on the MITRE framework. And again, it was used very much to actually help stop a ransomware event in its tracks. This is available to our members. And again, it also provides some ability to look at the funding you have in these areas and determine where you need additional funding. The other thing we have is the payment rights decision workflow. This is the pay or no pay decision-making criteria. It was provided by a member, talks about legal considerations. Do we have the ability to back up? In addition to that, ethical considerations. So the criteria that you'll want to bring to the appropriate people to determine whether or not you're going to make a payment. And the way we recommend it is to run through different scenarios of the degree of magnitude of the attack and determine whether or not you will pay or not pay on these decisions. And you could use this as a basis with your executives to have an idea of what kind of decisions you'd make well before a ransomware attack occurs. We have a couple of boardroom education contextual slides about the anatomy of an attack. just to kind of be able to explain how it works for the board members. And we also have a board cybersecurity briefing document. Again, these are all member provided, and they've been used and vetted in their organizations. That is a document that board members can take with them prior to the actual meeting. And it talks about their responsibilities, cyber insurance, responding to the growing ransomware attacks. It gives them guidance on their roles and responsibilities. And again, you can modify and update this to your particular needs. So we're going to get into the questions in a few minutes. Let me go through the summary. It's a growing, persistent threat. It's evolving, and there are higher ransom payouts. Organizations feel unprepared and overwhelmed, but we've shown you the value of collaboration, and the tools and guidance documents that we've put together is in terms of a methodical, effective approach to addressing the threat and the tools to support you. So we encourage our members who are listening here. We will give you these tools. Next week, they'll be available for use. Again, if you have any questions on using them, you can reach out to member services or to my team to help you do that. And again, for new members, we encourage you to come on board and begin to use these tools and to start collaborating with our members to make use of it. Just in terms of Connor, I'm going to ask you to kind of put up the poll questions, and then we're going to go back to the chat box in a second. Some of the new task force initiatives that we're running this year and into next year, and I think the Log4j vulnerability, I bring that up again, brings out the importance of knowing more information about your third parties in terms of the tools that they're using. So we have an active task force right now called Supply Chain Incident Response. You can see the topics that we're listing. Members are discussing new ways that we need to start looking at suppliers, tools we need to use to capture information. The way we used to categorize risks are different, because the risks now are not just risks of compromising information networks, really risks business of not having supplies. So what we're gathering, and then with this recent vulnerability, we find team members have to reach out to their third parties to see if they are impacted by this and what they're doing. So what tools are people using? How are they doing it more effectively? So we've had a couple meetings, but we're reconvening in early January. We encourage members of the collaborative to join these sessions. And again, we'd like new members to join as well, as we feel will offer tremendous value to you and your third-party risk management programs. So as we're going through the, we'll go through the poll questions. I remind you, your time today is worth 1 CVE credit. Reach out to us for us to confirm your attendance. Please also reach out to member services so that we can provide you with a copy of the presentation. And with that, I think we have about 10 more minutes we have for Q&A.
Great. Maybe it might be helpful, Tom. There's a number of comments and questions that came in. How about you? How about I run through those real quick?
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
Okay, great. So again, comments and questions. Thank you for those that have already expressed interest in learning more. I think the link was provided to everybody of how to reach out to us. VM integration with TPRM is a must, with things such as Log4j proves out. Yep, 100%. A couple comments around how security really is a business function. I'm not so sure if I would categorize it as a business function. I look at security more kind of in the spirit of enterprise risk management. It's a way to manage risk within an organization, and no organization runs without risk. So it's a decision criteria. It's a way of thinking about risk within a specific area. I would just maybe shape that a little bit differently. Kill switch, cyber kill switch is a critical capability most customers would appreciate. Appreciate it as risk mitigant. Yeah, you have to have it. I would suggest, however, and this kind of ties into some of the other comments or questions. Some of these questions were around, what's the very first thing that you would do to improve the security of an organization? What are some of the things that SMBs can do? Why the heck is anybody still running with local admin on the desktops, right? So a number of comments like that. Let me kind of bundle that all up together. We provided those three major categories already of what we think you ought to focus on when responding, when looking at your ransomware defense strategy. And I think those are right. If you want to go beyond those, if you want to just kind of broaden the conversation of how do you improve the cybersecurity of your organization, look at the CIS, I think it's top 18. It used to be CIS 20. I think it's 18 now. In a couple in there, they map it out. It gives you that roadmap for how to improve your organization. What does it say? Know what's on your network. Know what you have installed. Make sure you patch. These are pretty straightforward things. So really look at that. And of course, don't run with admin on your endpoints. That's like running with scissors. It's a bad idea.
Yeah. Exactly.
I think I hit most of those. How are CISOs tracking potential and actual ransomware attacks and doing risk assessment against remediation projects? You know what? I would actually, again, turn that on its head a little bit. I would look less, how to say this? Looking at the threat landscape is hugely important so that you know how to set up your defenses. Total, 100%. However, it gets to a point where you know it's bad. And everybody knows it's bad, like ransomware. So you don't really need to track that anymore. And there's a lot of people that are tracking it. So it's helpful to know what the average and the max payouts are and frequency against particular sectors. There's a lot of ISACs and other organizations that are providing data on that. So you don't really have to work too hard to get that. More importantly is putting that into that risk conversation, that risk lens for your business to guide investment and other decisions, right? That's the other side of the equation that I would suggest you want to lean on. Because that's not just ransomware, that's also your whole cyber program. Shucks, in the time that I was talking, 6 more came in. Okay, a couple thank yous. Well, you're welcome, thank you. Very generous. A couple ideas on technologies. I'll not share names. Okay, great. Tom, what am I missing?
Theoretically, what would happen if no one paid a ransom was one question.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's an interesting conversation. It's not going to happen, so don't worry about it. People are going to pay.
What do negotiators cost?
Yeah, so around 30 grand. You're going to pay
the upfront fee or something? Is that just
no, that's going to be your retainer. And again, you're going to be able to parlay that retainer money. If you don't use it for a response, you'll be able to parlay that into some other, like a tabletop. So you don't lose the money.
Yeah, and interesting sectors being targeted. I don't see government, which has a big threat service in healthcare. Yeah,
so from a targeted perspective, there's 2 ways to think about it. Yeah. Most ransomware is commodity. It's just running out there looking for victims. How is that happening? It's phishing, it's open RDP, or open vuln on an exterior facing system. Quite a bit of it is phishing and RDP. So a lot of victims are just victims by circumstance because they were vulnerable. Much fewer cases, the studies have shown, have actually been truly targeted. The bad guys wanted you, and they came after you with everything that they had, and they found out they got you through ransomware, through that vulnerability. That's actually a minority of the cases. The majority of cases are just commodity. It just happened, you tripped over the wire because you were vulnerable.
Right. So
And I'm sorry, one last thing on that, Tom.
Yep.
Very, very, very few ransomware attacks use ODAs. These are known vulnerabilities. So patch. Just patch. And even if you get ransomware in your environment, you are greatly reducing the possibility of it being able to spread in your environment if you patch. Another control, and we talked about this in the task force, that I really love. I think it's highly effective. I'm not going to name products or names, but what it essentially is managing your firewalls on your endpoints so that they disallow incoming connections. So think about that. If none of your laptops or desktops allow incoming connections from other laptops or desktops, and you can do it more broadly than that. But if you just limit it, like a laptop can't talk to a laptop, even if they're on the same segment, they don't see anything, right? So even if you have shared creds on your endpoints, which you shouldn't, just like you shouldn't be local admin, but sometimes it happens. But even if you have shared creds and bad guy gets on A and steals that hash and tries to hop over to laptop B, they're not going to see laptop B because laptop B is not allowing incoming connections. It is a highly effective way of stopping lateral movement and reducing risk to ransomware.
That's a great point, Arlen. Thank you for highlighting that. And it comes back to, I hate to say it, this good security hygiene. This is it's kind of like being prepared for ransomware. You've been ideally been preparing for this all along in your development of your security program. I'm not saying everyone has, and I know we all struggle with doing that in our resources, and maybe in the small SMB area, it's more acute. I'm not saying it is, but
it sure is. Of course it is. They have less access to resources. The security professionals are expensive, and we're at negative unemployment. Let's just be transparent about that. And SMBs are getting squeezed out. It's difficult for them.
Yeah, exactly. Which is unfortunate. Which is all the more reason to provide. This is why collaboration is so important.
True.
And as you said, the bad guys are collaborating. They're collaborating amongst themselves. In fact, some of the ransomware agents hire other agents to do their work for them. They pay them. I mean, that's how sophisticated this is. And based upon our
there's a whole marketplace out there for bad guys.
Yeah. So we'll come back to another question, but I guess the thing is right now, what was that? I'm mad as heck, and I don't want to take it anymore. It's a phrase of
from Network. What a great show.
Yeah. What are we doing about to go after these people? Governments, our government in terms of providing assistance from Homeland Security, et cetera.
Sure.
I read that we're organizing with other companies, and we did find some ransomware folks, and they got arrested. But do we need to do more? I mean, that's probably a rhetorical question.
Well, that could be its own hour-long conversation, Tom. And we have 1 minute. So here's the quick response. After Colonial Pipeline, the administration took aggressive action against these actors. We're seeing that across the board in the cyberspace. There's a level of awareness and action being taken now. It used to be dismissed. Oh, that's just some pimply kid living in their mother's basement. That's where we came from, to realizing that this is a very significant threat, not only to the homeland, but to private enterprise. So there's a lot of activity happening here. It's difficult to do. Why? Because these actors live in other countries overseas where there is no information sharing, there's no collaboration in law enforcement, and there's no extradition rights, right? So that's why they operate out of those regions. So it's a difficult challenge, and I'm encouraged by what the administration is doing.
Okay. Well, thank you. At the top of the hour, first of all, I'd like all of us to thank Arlen for your time today, your great insights and help here and expertise. It's made a great difference, not only to this presentation, our content, and to the collaborative.
Thank you.
I'd also like to thank the members here and prospective members for sharing your hour with us. We wish you all safe holidays, a very good 2022. With final advice, I'd say keep your chin up, keep your eyes forward, and as they say in the Marines, keep moving forward just by putting one step in front of the other. Just keep moving forward. So thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thank you all.